deciding that we matter and we're important enough that we deserve a good life, that we deserve a healthy relationship dynamic, that we deserve to be living a purposeful and meaningful life. It's all possible, but we have to decide that. The war on cancer is more like, don't decide that. Just leave society as it is, leave your life as it is, and then if something bad happens like cancer, then just go to war.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Leigh Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this week's episode of the Radical Health Rebel podcast, entitled Cancer is a Spiritual Journey, Paul Leendertze returns to the show to take a deep dive into the complex subject that is cancer, a disease that 1 in 2 people contract today, and only 50% of those people survive beyond 5 years. In this episode, Paul and I discuss the validity of conventional treatments, the causes of some specific types of cancer, and the efficacy of other alternative treatments. With so many of us affected by cancer in our lifetimes, either directly or via our loved ones, I believe this will be one of the most important episodes I will ever do. And please listen all the way to the end when Paul gives his top 3 tips for preventing cancer. Paul Leendertze, welcome back to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Absolutely. Glad to be here again.
Yeah, and how are you doing, Paul? It's been a while, isn't it, since the last episode?
Yeah, I think it's been a year or so, maybe.
Not quite. Maybe 8 months, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things have been great. I've got a lot more coaches now.
Mm-hmm.
Coaches are spreading around the world, bringing this knowledge of the root cause of cancer. Got some testimonials from some of my coaches with clients they're working with. So things are slowly growing as the world's ready for this kind of deeper healing work.
Yeah. And as we're going to discuss, it's probably more needed now than ever in human history.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's pretty concerning.
Yeah.
What
very much so. Very much so.
The number of people developing cancers.
Yeah.
Really shocking.
It's pretty scary.
Uh-huh.
So, Paul, for those who haven't listened to our previous episode, which was episode 3, could you explain your story and your journey on, how you've become the go-to person for people with, late-stage cancers and the go-to person for professionals wishing to learn more about preventing and healing cancer?
Yeah. It's great. Actually, someone, speaking of that, an oncologist, this will be the second one, just reached out to me, who's going to be taking my training. So that'll be 2 now. So it's just really inspiring for me. I've been working on the root cause of cancer now for, since 2008 is when I started. But only now, after 10 years, longer than that, right? Where are we? 2023. So, 15 years, is it now starting to reach like larger numbers of people? When I first started this work, the first person that I worked with back in 2012 who reversed her cancer, she had stage 4 cancer, told nothing could be done. She had tried all kinds of alternative approaches to cancer. And of course, conventional approaches. And then, now she had metastasized cancer, tumors on her spine. When she started to work with me, she came to my residency, which is what I did for a 10-year period after I wrote my first book, The Root Cause of Cancer, back in 2010. After that work together, her cancer disappeared. And so she's cancer-free today, which is many years, 15 years later or 13 years later. So, I thought, wow, this is going to just explode. People are going to want to learn this. That is not what I experienced at all. Mm-hmm. If anything, it's confronting this reality of cancer and what the real cause is so difficult for humanity at large. It's just so challenging, really, because it really means all kinds of things need to change, like either personally in our life or in society or like right across the whole world, like deep changes. I'm not talking about, oh, we all need to take better supplements or we all need to alkalinize our blood. Like, not to say that doing health principles has no value, but those things are not related to the root cause of cancer or to actually preventing it or healing. So it's far deeper. It's emotional, it's psychological, and it's actually very spiritual. So I've been doing this work for 10 years. My theory back in 2008 was that the root cause of cancer had something to do with stress. That's really how I began. And that led to me writing my first book, where I theorized that for many different reasons, I worked on this for a couple of years, and then I put together my book with my theory that there's a reason cancer appears in the body. It's related to stress. It's part of a survival mechanism that we get into if we're in chronic stress, if we can't resolve life challenges. That led to people coming to me, like that first example, her name's Lorna, who tried everything and couldn't heal. So then they were willing to work with me to try to investigate the root cause and try to address that. I did that for 10 years. So for 10 years, I worked with as many cancer patients as I could and I lived together for 3 weeks at a time. And so with every single client, we did not try to destroy their cancer, not even alternatively, because they already tried that significantly. So they had given up on that. They already knew that wasn't working for them. So all we did was try to identify the root cause. And that's what took us deeper. What's the stresses in your life? What kind of stress did you have in your childhood? What's going on in your relationships and so on? And that's when we started to get deeper into the root cause. And when you identify all that's going on and it becomes clear and you resolve that stress through change, which is never easy, like by no means ever easy. There's usually fear involved, big challenges with it once you dig deep. But when you resolve it, the cancer just disappears. And it actually disappears in about 3 weeks or less time. That's all it takes. Now, to get to that point where you resolve it and release that stored emotion, that stored pain, like whatever it is that's stored, that's causing the cancer, that can take, you got to go layers at a time. It can take multiple sessions. It takes a lot of work to get there, but if you devote yourself to that, you can heal yourself. And that is what I know now from my experience over these years, that's the only way to heal long term. Like, you can destroy a tumor. I've had many clients that came to me. The typical story, in fact, is that my clients first did chemotherapy or radiation or surgery, and their cancer was destroyed and they were declared cancer-free, like success. And then they keep doing tests to make sure it doesn't come back. And lo and behold, it does. And when it comes back, it's usually worse than the first time. And then they start to run into a crisis where they realize, I'm in a cycle here, or like a spiral, a downward spiral. Like, sometimes there's been the odd case where people have done treatments and their cancer doesn't come back. I have observed that. But I know that the reason it didn't come back is because they would have had some kind of correlating life change. That's really the real cause of the healing. So most of the time, unfortunately, but it's important to just know the truth here. Most of the time when people do treatments, they're declared cancer-free, their cancer comes back some months later. That's when they realize, like, something shifts. It's time to actually figure this out myself, because someone else isn't going to fix it for me. I got to do this. And that's where someone like me comes in, who's been doing that with people for now 13 years or however long I said it was, since 2008.
Yeah. But what led you to helping people with cancer? What was the kind of the spark, if you like?
Well, yeah, the spark was a massive tragedy in my family, which I'm grateful for today. Like, I've completely resolved that emotionally, and now I see it as a gift ultimately. But the pain back then was 2 deaths in my family. One was my stepfather, and one was a father figure who I called my dad. So I had 2 stepfathers die of cancer within 3 months of each other. And I was a holistic coach way back then. And we did everything. Like we just, we tried everything we could, changing diet, high quality supplements, and things like hydrogen peroxide therapy, vitamin C therapy, juicing wheatgrass, you name it, like everything we could possibly get our hands on. And both of them died ultimately. And so that was the thing that made me question one thing. And this was the big factor, I guess, that led me down this path. And my question was, is the theory about cancer, like the mainstream theory about cancer, actually correct? Because if it were not correct, then all of these approaches, both conventional and alternative, to try to destroy cancer probably won't work, or they're not going to be very reliable or effective, because it's just kind of like a guessing game. What if we don't understand the real truth of what cancer is? And so that's when I started to question, because of that pain and because of that loss, what cancer actually is. That led to my theory that maybe cancer is existing in response, like it's showing up in response to stress in our lives. It's not about genetics. It's not about, well, back then I thought maybe it's about pollution. Maybe it's about all the chemicals that are all throughout society, in our diet and so on. But as the years went on and I worked on the root cause with people, I started to have clients who had perfect diets, like eating organic food. I had clients come to me that had been battling cancer for 5 years, that they were so to the point, like a structured daily routine. I could not believe how much they had mastered their daily routine of life, yet their cancer was still getting worse. So that the only factor we could get into is, what's the deeper pains in your life? What are the deeper fears in your life? Do you have judgments, or, are you holding negativity somehow for some reason? And that's when I started to identify like major events, usually in a person's life, in their past, typically, and sometimes it's just a few months before their diagnosis, sometimes it's a few years before. But then we would identify some kind of event that held pain, which was unresolved. So when we dug into that, I had clients starting to cry, just break down and cry in front of me. And that's why my book, the title of the series, is called What's in a Tear? Because then I realized when a person has an emotional release and they're releasing teardrops, this actually has some kind of a purpose too. There's a reason why we're releasing. It's kind of interesting if you really think about it, like why, when we're releasing pain emotionally, does water flow out of our eyes? It's the weirdest thing, really. But I definitely correlated it to, it's a release of stress. Somehow the teardrops, let's say, hold the energy of stress. And if you ever have a good cry, you'll notice that at the end of that cry, you actually feel like you've emptied something out that needed to be released. So it became very clear to me over the years that the root cause of cancer is unresolved psycho-emotional stress that gets stuck in the body. So that's a general statement. I explain that very deeply and more thoroughly in my training. So I teach online training, cancer prevention coach, cancer reversal coach. So it takes some time to really reveal the whole process and how it really works and why, but it's actually quite profound. So that is a general overview of how I got to where we're sitting right now. I forget if I answered your question or if I just went on.
Yeah, that's good. That's
many tangents that I didn't even get to it.
No, that's good. That's good. So,
okay,
what I'd like to do is perhaps ask you some questions, common questions that arise about cancer. And my first question is, and again, this is something that you've kind of alluded to a degree already, but does making your bloodstream alkaline cure cancer?
It, I like the question because there's so much emphasis put on making your blood alkaline to prevent cancer or to reverse cancer. But what a lot of people don't understand, there's a few things that people aren't aware of. One is that cancer produces acidic blood. So the cancer itself produces lactic acid. So you can try to change your blood from your diet, but that won't stop the cancer from producing the acidity itself. Because cancer absorbs glucose out of the bloodstream, and the byproduct is lactic acid. Then the other thing is that a lot of people don't understand that psychological stress and emotional stress causes your blood to become acidic as well. So the emphasis is always like very much on the physical. Change your diet, sleep better. Of course, that's valuable. You know, it's important to have a healthy diet, of course. It's just not going to address the cancer. It's an important factor because cancer absorbs glucose. So you don't want to feed the cancer more glucose than, you know, it should get normally. It's always going to be absorbing glucose from the bloodstream because our bloodstream has glucose, like it has to have glucose in it because that's part of being healthy. But it has to be in homeostasis. So if you change your diet to optimize it so that you don't create blood sugar spikes and blood sugar surges, then that will help protect you from cancer growing. So that's important, but that's not the cure. That is not going to heal a person. You have to go deeper into the emotional realms, into the psychological realms, into the spiritual components of life, because that's where the root is. It's deeper.
Cool. So my next question is, does chemotherapy or other conventional treatments ever work? So do they have any value, basically?
It's kind of, it sort of depends on different factors, but, you know, when I first started this work, I was so much against chemotherapy and radiation because 2 people in my family did that and died. So I was really against it. And of course, when you do chemotherapy, radiation, you're not actually doing something healthy. And only if you do like healthy things will you get healthier, right? It's very damaging, chemotherapy and radiation. And studies show that many people die of the treatments. Like that's one of the references right in my book. People can die of the treatments. So, however, as I worked over the years, I became wiser to it because of just the experience, the different scenarios I ran into. And I learned over time that there were different cases of people who did chemotherapy or did surgery and like radiation, for example, on a brain tumor. So someone discovers they have cancer in their brain because they have a seizure. And then they don't know what to do. They don't know what's going on. They get rushed in and they end up doing radiation and it destroys the tumor. And then they regain function again and they stop having seizures. You know, so clearly the radiation has potentially saved their life. So then what happens though is the root cause has not been addressed. Then their cancer comes back and then they oftentimes die. So it's kind of depends on, there's different things to understand. So sometimes it can be helpful. I would say that in serious scenarios, serious situations where a person doesn't even know what to do yet to heal, that can save their life. And it has happened. I've run into a couple stories, not many, I really need to emphasize, over my whole period of many years, just a handful of stories where people have done conventional treatments and 20 years later, they're actually cancer-free still. So that can happen, but by far, the vast majority of the time, the treatments don't help long-term. It's like a temporary fix, and you've got to get to the root of it. So if it gives you more time, like if you're having seizures, go get radiation maybe on your brain, maybe, like be careful. But the sooner you can work on the root cause, that's actually what matters more than anything. So if you're not in a crisis, then, you know, I would never do treatments. You know, And for myself, even if I was in a crisis, I still wouldn't do treatments, but that's because of my knowledge and experience about it. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah, I'm not like dead set against treatments anymore because I know sometimes it helps, but I highly recommend not doing them if you can avoid it, and focusing as soon as you can all of your time and energy on changing your life. Do that. That's the thing that heals you, and that's the only thing that will really heal you for sure.
Yeah, so it comes down to context, doesn't it? Quite often, like you say, if someone's in a situation where, a tumor's, compressing on a vital organ or a blood vessel or something like that, maybe a conventional treatment is the best thing for you at that particular time. And I guess the other thing is as well, is that for some people, this is why you need to look at each individual person differently. Some people might not even have the energy or the fortitude or the attitude to make any life changes, right? Some people would rather continue, doing what they're doing. Let's just use an example, eating a very high sugar diet because that brings them joy. And the thought of giving that up, they might say, well, do you know what? I'd rather die than give up sugar. And we know that that's actually quite common, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it comes down to context at the end of the day.
It's kind of, the rate of cancer today really reflects how off course or like off path humanity as a whole is, because most people, because of their life and because of different life challenges and the degree to which their needs as a human being are not actually being met, have learned different coping strategies, different behavior patterns to survive life. Like that's what the whole war on cancer is always talking about. Survival, like increased survival time. If we can just get you to survive longer, but what about actually thriving in life? So many people are already in a sort of survival mode. Like at the end of the day, just to get a little dose of happiness, have a beer, have some refined sugar, smoke a joint. There's a lot of coping mechanisms, like the odd alcohol now and then, that's different. A little smoke a joint the odd time, that's different. But once you get into a coping mechanisms where this is a daily ongoing thing, that's when something in life is not truly serving you. And yes, I've run into all kinds of people who truly don't even want to be here anymore. In the deepest level, they're just done with this shit show kind of a thing, Like when your needs are not being fulfilled as a human being, you'll reach a certain point where why even be here? So this is why healing and taking responsibility for ourselves is truly an act of spirituality. Because if you start taking responsibility for your life and your circumstances and fulfilling your needs, you'll start learning and becoming aware of things that typically society does not even focus on or even talk about or put value on. And you become the change. You actually start helping heal basically humanity. Like when you start healing yourself, you're creating ripples of change. So it's a spiritual act, in my opinion, because spirituality is about creation, right? Like the whole world that we live in. So rather than saying, you know what, society sucks, this is all bullshit, I'm just going to eject out, or I'm just going to decide that living with coping mechanisms is good enough, you can do something else, and you can say, you know what, I'm going to actually step into my power and do something with it that leaves a mark on humanity in my lifetime, that like really makes a change. And that's desperately needed to end cancer. Desperately needed, because the only way cancer is ever going to end is if people do that. People actually decide that they're going to heal themselves and decide that they're going to learn the deeper causes of cancer and prevent it. Then we'll end cancer. But the longer people just keep succumbing and agreeing to just living, like surviving life and just receiving whatever the government provides, receiving whatever the school system provides, letting the doctors look after our health, watching the news to decide what we're going to focus on in our life, we just keep, so much of humanity is just being tricked or agreeing into just handing over their power. And the rate of cancer just keeps going up and up and up. And other diseases, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's quite interesting, isn't it, that, all we ever hear is modern science is so great, it's doing great things with cancer. But yet, as you say, the amount of people being diagnosed with cancer is consistently going up. So how is that such a great job?
Yeah. It's all marketing. It's really, truly, sadly, tragically, shockingly marketing. In my book, I have the front cover of a Time magazine from 1951, and it has a picture of a patient on a hospital bed receiving radiation. Back then, the radiation machine's like the size of a house, and it says "Fresh Hope in the War on Cancer." And it's just year after year, it's always a message like, we're winning the war, we need more money, we're making progress, a new promising drug has been discovered. It's just like the same story over and over, but like with each generation, and with just the common awareness of people don't realize what's happening. So there really isn't any success or progress happening in the cancer societies. The rate of cancer is just rising and rising. The rate of cancer today is 1 in 2 people around the world. Yeah. Which is frightening. 1 in 2 people. That means half of everyone's families is going to develop cancer. And statistically, even though despite treatments, this is statistics, 50% of those people die within 5 years. And then they just stop recording it after 5 years. So if you die 5 years and a week later, you're still recorded as cured. So the statistics are also misleading. We're not in a good situation.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, when they're talking about successes, as you say, they're looking at treatment, right? They're not looking at, well, the rate of cancer is going down, because it's not, it's going up. But they're looking at, as you said, the word survival. And again, it's only recorded for 5 years. So you could die, 5 years and 1 day after you were diagnosed or started treatment, and you would be considered a success.
Yeah.
Right. And then you hear messages coming out to the public about how well, these new scientific discoveries are having on cancer rates. But actually, when you look at the figures, that's just not accurate.
No, it's not. The wording is always really carefully chosen. And, the research done on cancer, it's just always studying cancer cells inside of a lab. It's never studying the lives of people. And that's what we're here for, is for life. And we need to learn how to live, how to really have a good life, how to have healthy emotions. Of course, we're all going to experience stress. We're all going to experience challenges in life. But what's been lost is how to grow through those challenges. What's been lost is having courage, loving ourselves, deciding that we matter and we're important enough that we deserve a good life, that we deserve a healthy relationship dynamic, that we deserve to be living a purposeful or meaningful life. It's all possible, but we have to decide that. The war on cancer is more like, don't decide that. Just leave society as it is, leave your life as it is, and then if something bad happens like cancer, then just go to war and we'll look after you. I mean, we'll increase your survival time. We'll do that. And treatments for cancer are insanely expensive.
Profitable.
They're tens of thousands of dollars at least, and all it is to increase survival time.
Yeah.
It's not a good goal. We need to, if you have cancer, what I share with my clients and everybody is that we need to turn cancer into a gift. If you have cancer, it's not a gift. It can destroy you for real. But if you can turn that into a gift because you take it to motivate you to do everything you need to do to change your life for the better, for real, then it will truly be a gift. And that's how you heal yourself, as a general statement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I can't remember how long ago it would have been, probably 2 years ago, I'm guessing. Someone I know announced on Facebook, not someone I know very well, but I know him through interactions on Facebook. And he announced that he had cancer. And, he was kind of saying, don't worry, I'm going to win this war. And then as soon as I'm hearing that language, I'm thinking, oh, this isn't good. This isn't good. Mm-hmm. So I just dropped him a message and just said, look, because he lives in the States. And I said, look, I know quite a few people in your neck of the woods that can help you from a more of a holistic point of view. And I was actually thinking of you as well, because I believe he was living in Florida, I think. And I think at the time you were living in Costa Rica. And I thought, I was kind of really trying to push him in your direction. And he got back to me and he just said, oh, no, don't worry. I've got it all covered. I've got the best doctors in the world helping me. And I thought, this doesn't sound, just intellectually and, from an intuitive level, I was kind of thinking, it doesn't sound good to me. But, I offered to, potentially push him to people that I thought could help him. And, every week or so, I'd see a picture on Facebook, it'd be him in hospital, connected up to a drip, getting his chemo. And he was kind of saying, yeah, I'm fighting this. I'm going to win this war. It was that language, fighting, winning the war.
Yeah.
And every month or so, I'd be seeing these posts on Facebook saying, yeah, I'm going to win. This isn't going to beat me. I'm never going to give up. And then in the last sort of 6 to 8 months, the tone starts to change. Oh, yeah, I'm really not doing so well today, but I'm going to win this war. And then the next post, it will be, yeah, it really hit me for 6, but I'm never giving up. And then I think it was in January, I saw a message and it's like, oh, the cancer's spread throughout my entire body. My bones are starting to dissolve. And then about a month ago, there was a message on his Facebook account saying, sadly, he's gone. And I just saw that whole journey from afar, just thinking, it's just basically he's just gone down the conventional route, and it just hasn't helped him at all, and it hasn't helped his wife, and it hasn't helped his children. And I think he's the same age as me. Mm-hmm. Just really sad, but sometimes you can't get through to people and just say, look, there is an alternative to what you're going to go down, When 35-year-old Amanda first scheduled to see me, she'd been suffering for 19 years from severe IBS, diarrhea and fecal incontinence, along with abdominal pain and bloating. Her condition had not only made life uncomfortable for Amanda, but very inconvenient, as she had to walk 2 hours to work every day along a route that had public toilets, and she'd never been on holiday as an adult because of her condition. The only advice that several doctors and specialists had given Amanda was to take Imodium, and when she first saw me, she was taking 5 Imodium a day and wasn't getting any better. To help Amanda, I ran tests to find out what foods were right for her metabolic type, to see which foods she was sensitive to, and to assess her gut microbiome. Tests showed that Amanda had several food sensitivities and a parasite infection. Over the coming weeks, I coached Amanda to eat right for her type and to replace the foods she was sensitive to, and a protocol to deal with her parasite infection. And after 3 months, Amanda was IBS-free, and she also reported her skin was much improved and she had lost weight. And she booked a holiday for her and her husband to New York, as they'd never been on a proper honeymoon because of her IBS. And if you're suffering like Amanda was, and you want to get to the root cause of your problem, you can arrange a consultation with me at www.bodycheck.co.uk. And if we're a good fit, I could help you achieve the same kind of results as Amanda. Now, back to the podcast.
I'm glad you shared that story. It's like a super sensitive, topic, cancer, and it's always a scary conversation. But that's the hard part about healing and solving this whole battle with cancer is actually just knowing the truth like really connecting to the raw truth of what is so common in the war on cancer. That story you just shared is an extremely common story. And there's an oncologist that I've met recently and I reference her in the new edition of my first book that I'm coming out within the next couple of weeks. It's just going off to print right now, or to the layout person, and then it has to go to print. And she did a TEDx talk, and you can look up that talk. It's called "How to Talk to What Kind of Language You Should Use When You Talk to Someone with Cancer." The title's something like that. Her name is Katie, and Dr. Deming. She's a radiation oncologist, and what she actually did is she did research with colleagues, and the research was published in the psychosocial cancer or oncology journal. And they found that this language, this war on cancer language, I'm a survivor, I'm a soldier, I'm in the battle, let's fight cancer, I'm in this fight to the end, all of that stuff. So that's good on the surface in the marketing of it, and doing these initial social media posts and stuff. But her, as an oncologist, she did this research because she started to realize this language is actually not good for any of her patients. And her patients were the ones telling her that. They were saying, I hate the word survivor. Don't call me a survivor. It just reminds me that that I have cancer, or that I had cancer and it might come back. Because that word survivor, it's complicated. So her research shows it's really detrimental to people. 60% of cancer patients do not want that language once they get into the reality of it. And she actually quit her job. So she was a radiation oncologist. She actually stepped out of that. And the reason she stepped out of it is because she could not do that work anymore after watching so many people not healing. And, someone that recently just took my cancer prevention coach training, she was a nurse in like an oncology nurse. So she was one of the nurses that were right in administering treatments on a daily basis and close to patients. She quit her job and took my training. She quit her job because of all the people she would see have that experience that you just described, where they start the war on cancer, they're confident, and they go downhill over time, or their cancer goes back, and she watches them because they're coming in doing treatments, and she just could not do her job anymore. She quit. She wanted to go deeper and actually get into real healing work. And that's what the war on cancer does. It's like if your house is on fire and you're focused constantly on battling the fire, then at a certain point, like, when are you going to actually fulfill your needs? If day after day you're battling a fire, like, are you drinking water? Are you sleeping well? Are you like having happiness? Are you experiencing freedom? And so on. You can just get stuck on the threat, and if you're just stuck on the threat, you stop living. So a battle is an illusion. Like, winning the war is an illusion, because the war actually never stops, because you're not getting to the root cause. Something's causing the cancer to grow. That's what you actually have to address. What's causing it to grow? And like I said, it's deeper. It's psycho-emotional stress that's unresolved, and it's carried in the body. So you have to unravel that. You've got to go through a life-changing experience. You've got to grow through the challenge of that. And that's how you heal it at the roots. Otherwise, you will be in a battle. It's like, trying to deal with weeds by just cutting them, but you don't get the root. So, the typical analogy. It's kind of simple with that analogy. It's just easier said than done to face all those fears, because that's the other thing. When people get hooked into treatments and the war, to step out of it, they have to face the fear of death, essentially. Because the belief system is so much like, if you stay in the war, you're going to be safe. If you let go of that, you're going to die. And that's what usually doctors will tell people. I just interviewed someone recently for my own podcast that I want to start. And he's one of the coaches that took my training. And he reversed his testicular cancer with no treatments. But first, he took treatments, and his oncologist told him there's an 80% chance that you will heal with these treatments. And he said, okay, well, I'll do that. So he did the treatments, cancer's gone. Then, I forget how many months later, like maybe it was about 3 months, something like that. Cancer appeared again in his tests, and it had spread, tiny little spots spread all over in his brain and all throughout his body. So then he didn't know what to do. They scheduled, he went and had an appointment with an oncologist, and he said, what do I do? The oncologist told him the protocol, more chemotherapy. And he said, what are the chances that I'm going to heal? And his oncologist said, 30%. And that's when he realized, like, wait a second, the first time you said it was 80%, but now you're saying it's 30%. And the 80% in reality was 0%. Right? That's what it actually was. 0% long term. Because if your cancer just comes back 3 months later, that's 0% of success for that treatment. So now the oncologist says 30. So that's when he said, I'm not doing it. And long story short, he stepped away from the chemo. He refused. He had to face the fear of death. He actually just realized I could die, but he realized he would die if he kept doing it, because that became evident to him. So now the strength to face the fear of death, improves. So he steps out of that and then tried to focus on healing. And ultimately, that wasn't even working at first. But then he had this moment. I don't want to give away the whole story, because it's his story to tell. It's on my podcast, but he ultimately healed himself psycho-emotionally. And when he did that, he released all of the stress that was stuck in his body. And 1 week later, his cancer markers had gone down significantly. 2 weeks later, they had gone down just as much again. 3 weeks later, gone. And he heard me in a podcast, some other podcast that I've done with someone, talking about the cause of testicular cancer. And when I was explaining what causes testicular cancer, he was just blown away, because that's exactly what happened in his life. And that's why he took my training, and now he's helping people with cancer, because he knew that I knew what I was talking about, because that's exactly what happened to him. So I think we're in a paradigm shift. I really think that it's time, like it's actually here, where there's a substantial amount of people taking responsibility for their life, taking responsibility for their emotional well-being, becoming more courageous, learning how to set goals and have a dream. And the Great Awakenings here, where people are realizing, like, we can't let the government and the medical system look after us and our world. We can't let corporations just take over the freaking planet. We got to starting our own businesses, our own self-employed business. We got to start, taking responsibility for our life and for this world. And if we're in a dark place, we got to get out of it. It's our choice to get out of it and come into the light. And I really think that's happening, because I never would have imagined that I would be teaching people all that I learned over those years. Now that I'm doing this training, I feel sort of blessed. I'm like, thank you so much that I'm finally able to pass a lot of this knowledge on to people. I really think it's time. The paradigm shift is happening.
Yeah, definitely. Just want to go back to, so you mentioned testicular cancer, and you mentioned, your thoughts around why people get that. I'm just wondering, if someone's listening to this that perhaps may have testicular cancer, what would you say are potentially the causes of testicular cancer?
Okay, well, I like to go really deep into this, like in my actual training. It takes, my training is 25 hours. So it takes time to develop like a deep understanding, and that's important. But I can still share probably enough that someone could even heal just with this knowledge. It takes some support and guidance, to do the process of healing. But the cause of testicular cancer is always, the general theme is related to a loss of trust or safety related to sex, a sexual relationship,
Mm-hmm.
or trust and safety in sexual relationships at large. Does that make sense? So
Mm-hmm.
you could have a challenge in a relationship and lose trust and safety because of something related to sex in that relationship, or you could just lose the relationship or be done with that, but now just feel generally unsafe and have a lack of trust with regards to sexual relationships in the world at large.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cause of testicular cancer. And it's been that every single time I've had a client with testicular cancer. So I hear all kinds of like explanations sometimes, from other sources of explanations for cancer, I'll just say, that are not accurate. And I just know it's not accurate because I've been observing this for so many years. So it's not like I'm theorizing it. A lot of people talk about cancer and what the cause might be, but they maybe just read it in a book or something. But this is like what I've observed with my own eyes. So it's just undeniable to me. And that's what Phil is the name, the guy that I'm interviewed in my podcast. His story is mind blowing. It's so valuable to hear. I can't wait to transfer it into a podcast availability. But yeah, when he heard me explain that, that's exactly what went on with his life. So you can hear his exact story that'll be my first podcast. It's
Awesome.
really valuable to hear. I think it's going to help a lot of people. He is a passionate man to help, change the reality of cancer today. And I think he's doing it already.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds very interesting. Something I just want to mention, which you gave a couple of examples before, but going back somewhere around 18 years ago, I worked with a lady, and she was a very prominent surgeon in the UK, and she specialized in gynecological cancers. So she would remove tumors from women. That was her job, very well paid job, very high esteem. And she worked with me for a few years as a client. And I can't remember how many years she worked with me as a client, but obviously she went through quite a process of change during that time. And
I bet she did. Yeah, that's interesting.
And one day she said to me, she said, "I've just realized," she said, "I cut women open, I take tissue out of their body, I sew them back up again, and I just send them out the door." She said, "I'm not really helping them, am I?" And
Wow.
I was like, "Oh, okay, you're getting it now." And
Wow.
and she said to me, "Do you know what? Almost every one of my patients is overweight / obese." And she said, "I can't do this anymore." She said, "I can't do it because I'm just not helping people." And then it was shortly after that, she stopped being my client. She didn't need to be my client. I taught her all she needed to know. She was then, she was self-sufficient. She was empowered to look after her own health. And she contacted me a few years later, and she said, "We've moved out of London, her and her daughter, because they loved horse riding." And that was actually one of the things that she started doing after working with me for a while. She actually did a couple of sessions with Paul Chek as well. And she realized that one of the things she loved to do as a kid was to ride horses. So she got a couple of horses for her and her daughter. They ended up moving out to the country, and she became a cranial sacral therapist.
Oh, amazing.
Because she thought she'd be much better off helping people as a cranial sacral therapist than she would as a surgeon for women that have got, cervical cancer. So that's just another one to add to your two examples.
Yeah, it's a great story. It makes me, there's two things I wanted to bring attention to, like more attention to. One is that when she realized that what she was doing didn't line up with like the truth or what felt right inside, and she decided to leave that career, that's in my opinion, what spirituality actually is. That's being a real spiritual person. That's what spiritual growth is. A lot of people can't face it. They can't face the change. So they just hold on to what's actually dark. And then it just perpetuates darkness. And then the end of the story is beautiful too, because then it also shows that even though she left that career, which was at that point obviously providing her financial safety, providing her with pride, maybe, or, providing her with purpose, she had to let all of that go. And then it was eventually replaced again. New life came, and now it's meaningful. Now it feels good. And now it's not dark, but actually something truly good for people, herself and humanity. So this is why cancer is a spiritual thing. It's really about stepping out of a reality that's not actually ideal. It's not truly fulfilling our needs in devotion to creating a new reality that does. That's generally what the healing process really is about. So I love that story. Thanks for sharing that.
There's some, I'm guessing you're familiar with Dr. Stanislav Basinski?
That name rings a bell. I think I know who you're talking about. Is he the baking soda?
No. So he's Polish, as you might have guessed from the name. But he's been in the US for some time, and he's developed a system, or more than one system actually. I'm trying to think of the actual name of the word. I think it's called angioplasty or something along those lines. And basically he has a very high success rate with cancer patients. And the FDA in America and the CDC have gone after him legally, and they've tried to shut him down on many occasions and failed. So he's still practicing. He's not in prison, although that's what the authorities wanted for him. But he obviously doesn't use the same ideology as you. He uses a medical ideology, if you like. And when he went to court, they had people queuing around the block to give evidence of his patients who had been successfully treated, which is the main reason why they couldn't, put him in prison or take away his license, because, it was evident from these people that, his treatment was kind of successful. I was just going to ask you, why you thought maybe his approach seems to be successful from what we're seeing, but yet he doesn't seem to address any kind of emotional or spiritual aspects of the person.
Well, that's a really good question. I'm glad that you asked it. I don't know that story myself, so I kind of have to comment from a place of, not really knowing the whole picture. I heard what you said, but I think what I would share, what comes to mind is a recent client that began working with me a couple of months back. She had gone to a place in the United States, and it cost $75,000. And she lived at that place for 3 months. And she had ovarian cancer. And that was not focused on emotions and psychology and spirituality. It was all treatments, all, alternative. It was a mixture of all conventional and alternative type treatment protocols, more focused holistically. And at the end of that experience, she was cancer-free. And there was 4 other women in that treatment program as well, each paid $75,000. And all of them were cancer-free. 5 people at the end of 3 months. So that's pretty incredible. But what my client told me is that less than 3 months later, actually, I think it was just a month later, her cancer markers started going up again. And then she was re-diagnosed with cancer. So what she did is she called those other friends because she actually became sort of close with them because they were living in this treatment thing for 3 months. And she checked to see how they were doing, and every single one of them, they all had cancer come back. So that's what comes to my mind, is what I've seen over and over again is stories of people's cancer going away because they did some kind of, like, I guess you could call it beneficial, you know, if your cancer goes away, usually it's massively expensive, but it's not addressing the root cause. So then that story reaches people, the good part of the story, you know, but then the bad part tends to not reach people. So I don't, you know, like with the guy that you were sharing with at the beginning of our conversation, he probably had a ton of followers liking his posts when he's making a post and making a statement like, I feel amazing. I'm going to win this war on cancer. I'm going to make it. And he looks great and he's like empowered. And so then he probably has, you know, 1,000 likes on his post. But then when he's posting near the end, I'm not doing so well, or when he dies, you know, his followers that message tends not to reach people. So I don't know if that applies to the guy you just shared, because I really can't say for sure. But that would be what I would just at least caution about, as I would say, from my experience, nothing works long term. Nothing. Unless you address the root cause. You can destroy cancer in conventional ways that are super damaging, like chemotherapy just destroys like many parts of your body. You can develop chemo brain because of that. That's a term a lot of people don't ever even learn about, even though they're taking chemo. Chemo brain is a common side effect. It can be lifelong. So there's the conventional approaches, and they actually work to destroy cancer. Then it comes back. Then there's alternative approaches, and some alternative approaches can work too, but then the cancer comes back because both conventional and alternative are not actually healing the root cause. They're both still actually trying to destroy the cancer. But what's really important for people to realize is this is crucial for being able to heal, and it's also crucial for preventing cancer, is that without realizing it, so I don't mean this in any kind of a guilt way, without realizing it, your own life, circumstances, the stresses, all of the factors in your life that caused your cancer. Like, you somehow have to figure out how what you're doing in your life has led to cancer. If you have cancer, you created it, not intentionally, but you created it. And if you can accept that, which is not easy, but if you can accept that, then you can uncreate it. Then you can heal yourself. But until you take full responsibility for the fact that you can harm yourself in this life, but you can also do good for yourself in this life, if you don't take full responsibility for both the light and dark of your life, then you have to, the only other thing you can do is either do nothing or hand your power over to someone else, pay someone $75,000 to get them to do some new and improved, incredible, amazing treatment that gets your cancer to go away. And then when you go back into your life, back into your reality, an unchanged person, you didn't learn anything, then the cancer just comes back. That's just how it works. So that's really important to be aware of. It's hard to be aware of it, but that's just how it works. You know, you got to take responsibility for yourself. Of course, no one creates cancer intentionally, but that's how it works, you know?
Yeah. And it'd be interesting. I mean, I've been aware of Dr. Brzezinski for quite a long time now. I've never kind of heard of people coming back and saying that it worked temporarily. I mean, again, I don't know. Maybe, you know, your theory is right. Maybe there is a short-term benefit, but actually in the long term, it didn't really help. But I've certainly, from what I've seen, I've not heard that, but that doesn't mean that's not the case.
I would say that if he really is having success, I bet he is actually doing the emotional and spiritual work, and maybe he just doesn't advertise that. So maybe he
Maybe.
says, "I have this program. Come in, we'll look after you." And then in the program, you realize, okay, we're going to work on multiple things here, perhaps.
Mm. Yeah, it'd be interesting if you go away and have a look into him and come back and share your thoughts.
I'm really curious. Yeah, I would.
Mm.
I'll have to get his name again from you, like the spelling. So
Yeah,
I can.
there's quite a few documentaries and movies that he's done. But I guess
Okay.
the reason why you kind of think, yeah, maybe he is the real deal is because the authorities went after him so hard. That's normally a sign, isn't it? And I'm sure you've heard on many occasions that there's someone working on some miracle cure for cancer, and strangely they all seem to commit suicide, which is rather strange.
Yeah. Well, two of the people that I reference in my book, after I put them in my book and referenced them, they they were assassinated,
Well,
both of them. Andreas Moritz, who wrote the
hmm
book "Cancer's Not a Disease,"
yeah,
um,
yeah,
it's a
I'm familiar
survival
with that.
mechanism.
Hmm.
And then the other person, what's the other man's name? He was an oncologist researcher. I reference his amazing work that shows how cancer grows in the body and how our body protects it, how our immune system protects cancer cells all the time. It's just amazing research that he found. He was assassinated. So,
Was it official?
um,
Was it that were they officially called suicides?
um,
That's what generally tends to happen.
yeah, I think they might have been like the second doctor that I reference. I'm sorry, I just can't remember his name. He's in the back of my book. He's referenced a lot in there. His research is amazing. Um, but he still didn't understand cancer, but he just brought a big component that was essential for unraveling it all. He was found dead in the forest in his backyard, a shotgun blast. And they say that he did that himself. So he
Mm.
took a shotgun and shot himself. So
Which you need very, very long arms to be able to do.
yeah. So it's a pretty intense world, the world of
Mm.
cancer. And
Mm.
how intense can it get? 50% of of humanity is developing cancer. That's a lot of people. There's 8 billion people on the planet. 26,000 people per day die of cancer. 26,000 a day. There's a lot of money involved. There's careers on the line. Like what you just shared, that doctor, she was a gynecologist. She's making tons of money. She's proud. She just um, dragged herself through probably 10 freaking years of school, just agonizing, studying and, sacrificing her life. And then she finds out after she's making all the money and she has all this pride and she sacrificed so much of her life, then she finds out she's not actually helping people in a deeper way,
Mm.
truly. Like you said, she's just cutting something out of their body, sending them out the door. Well, not everyone has the strength or the courage or the heart to actually just step out of it. So the darkness just keeps perpetuating, perpetuating. Um, or at least it has for many years.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier that, for some people it can take as little as 3 weeks to cure cancer. Is that I'm guessing that's from the time when you completely not only just find out what the stress is that's caused it in the first place, but actually having dealt with that stress, like completely released it from the body. Are you a personal trainer, exercise professional, or medical professional who wants to upskill and take your knowledge to the next level? And would you like to take a class and be taught personally by me? I'm, of course, talking about Czech Integrative Movement Science Level 1 in Lancashire, England, on the 25th to the 29th of October 2023. I'll be teaching a clinically tested system that makes sense of the entire health and fitness journey, from anatomy to assessment to program design and coaching. You will learn 40 assessments, 60 conditioning exercises, and 27 program design principles. And the Check framework brings them all together into an incredibly adaptable and effective system. From assessments to exercises to program design and coaching, this is a complete system. Students who master that system can create powerful programs that are tailored specifically to their individual clients' needs, abilities, and motivations. If you're serious about your work and want to take it to the next level, you can enroll on Check Integrative Movement Science Level 1 with me in Lancashire in the north of England on the 25th to the 29th of October 2023. And you'll need to enroll by the end of June to complete the 3 fantastic prerequisite online classes: program design, scientific core conditioning, and scientific back training that will prepare you greatly for your IMS1 class. For more details, check out the link in the show notes, but don't delay, places are limited. I hope to see you there.
That's right, yeah. So I have a testimonial on my website. In my cancer residency, which I don't run anymore because I sold my place, when the pandemic began, I had a residency, right? That was what I had for 10 years. And when the pandemic began, I had to sell my place because clients that wanted to come to my residency from different parts of the world could not come because of lockdown. So I just stopped making any money. My income went to zero, and my bills were at that time were really high. And I tried to hold classes and workshops. I wanted to just okay, if I can't help people, I'll just start teaching. And then people were calling the police on me because I was having more than 5 people in my house, because part of Canada's lockdown is you can't gather in a house more than 5 people. So then I had the police called on me twice. So that, combined with other spiritual signs and so on, I realized it's time for me to just sell and move. So I've been traveling since, and I've been learning a lot about the world. It's amazing. But in my residency, I had a 90% success rate with people reversing their cancer. Since then, I've been working just online, so I don't have my residency, and I would really like to create that again somehow, someday, because it's really helpful for people to be able to just step out of their life and focus entirely on healing. So now I'm just doing Zoom calls, but I've learned I've learned so much over these years that now, recently, in the last 6-month period, 2 of my clients have reversed their cancer after 1 session. And their cancer so in that 1 session, they learn what the root cause is. So the point in healing is to, once you understand what the root cause is, then you resolve it. When it's resolved, then cancer starts disappearing immediately, and then it just takes, depending on the size of the cancer, where it is in the body, it takes anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. So the 2 testimonials I have with 1 session are on my website. That's lung cancer and skin cancer. But something like liver cancer could take maybe longer, and different cancers are also harder to heal. Lung cancer tends to, I don't want to say it's easy, because that's not my point, the point I'm trying to make here, but lung cancer tends to be one of the cancers that are a little bit easier to address versus something like pancreatic cancer. If you look at statistics, like pancreatic cancer, typically it has maybe it's the lowest survival rate.
Yeah, in the medical system it is.
Yeah, the psycho-emotional theme behind that is very difficult to solve. And if you look at Steve Jobs, who was one of the richest men ever to walk the planet, despite the fact that he was a gazillionaire, no amount of money could help him heal. So that just shows money is not the answer either. And you can watch a video of him. I explain very deeply in my training to students. I show this video to show what the cause of pancreatic cancer is. But essentially, the sheer magnitude of what Steve Jobs would have to face in his life to change, to address, to transform was just too much for him to heal, because he was the head of just massive companies and organizations with so much on the line, so many relationship dynamics going on. It was just beyond. But the stress, the ongoing unresolved stress, is what did it. So you can see a video of him collapsing just before he dies, actually. And somehow this video is available. So I'm really grateful for it, because it helps bring more awareness to what's going on. But you can see the last moments, multiple people are sitting around the table asking him for help, asking him for advice. He has stage 4 cancer, and he's, maybe has a few days to live. Like, he literally collapses, but he's still stuck in that dynamic of his work life.
I guess that might be what you'd call an archetypal possession.
That sounds like an efficient way to,
The
describe.
entrepreneur.
Yeah, an archetypal possession. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, stuck, hooked into that attachment. That's a strong archetype. It's like the archetype that builds $1 billion business, but it's the archetype that can also destroy you.
Yeah. So you mentioned pancreatic cancer, and I'm guessing you're familiar with William Kelly's work.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So William Kelly was, again, I can't be sure of the exact dates, but I think it was in the 1950s he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And his doctors said, sorry, nothing we can do to help you. Go home, get all your papers in order. And he went home and he thought, I'm not accepting that. So he basically started doing his own research. And on doing his research, he started basically doing a protocol. And basically his cancer got better. His cancer went away. And I think he died either in the 1990s or in the 2000s, I think. But in the 1960s, he had an assistant called Bill Walcott, who I believe you're aware of.
Is that metabolic typing or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So William Kelly, after healing himself from pancreatic cancer, started working with patients, and Bill Walcott worked alongside him. And William Kelly suggests that he had a 100% success rate with pancreatic cancer.
Incredible.
Right?
I'd love to read up and see what he says.
Yeah, you can. So he wrote a book about it. I can send it to you because it's out of print, so you don't have to. It doesn't cost anything. If you go online, you can download the PDF. But it's a pretty interesting read. And his concept was that a tumor is just like a baby, right? But obviously, a baby should grow in the body, whereas a tumor shouldn't really grow in the body. And at the time when the baby gets to a certain size, some enzymes get shut down, which allows the baby to grow. And so part of the protocol for people with pancreatic cancer was to take very, very high dose pancreatic enzymes. And that as part of the process that actually kind of dealt with the tumor.
Interesting. And the change in his life was probably because he obviously wasn't in the health, like helping people with pancreatic cancer, hiring Bill Walcott and doing that work when he was first diagnosed with pancreas. So what I would be interested to know is, what was his life before his diagnosis? Because that's an important factor.
So what's your view on what can cause pancreatic cancer?
Well, it takes a while to explain, like I said, because there's layers to it. But up at the surface, the general theme is related to power or disempowerment. So if you look at Steve Jobs' video, he's experiencing disempowerment. So now from there, it's always unique because everyone's still different.
Yeah.
So the story of Steve Jobs is like radically different from the stories of William Kelly, but the theme would be the same, disempowerment as a general statement.
Yeah.
So then you got to go deeper and look into childhood, specific experiences, and look into the details to unravel what exactly is going on. But that's the general answer.
Yeah, it's so fascinating for me, you know, this episode and when we did the previous episode, it fits in terms of, you know, the causes of cancer. It just fits completely into the 7 chakra model.
Yeah.
Like every time I've asked your view on, you know, what do you think causes this cancer? What do you think causes that cancer? It just fits every single time directly into the chakra system, which is fantastic, isn't it? You know,
it is amazing because this is actually very scientific. It's not in mainstream science. So it appears like it's not scientific. But what I ended up discovering, I didn't know this when I first learned about the chakras years ago, you know, the 7 chakras, like you mentioned, but each of those chakras is associated with a nerve plexus. So like the 3rd chakra, which is the chakra of disempowerment or empowerment, power, that chakra is associated with the solar plexus of the spine of the nervous system.
Yeah.
So that nerve branch is connected to a specific part of the brain too that handles the psychological themes of life related to empowerment. And then the body is where we feel. So the brain is where we think, and then the body is where we feel. So if we're thinking about power, that happens not just anywhere in the brain, but in a specific spot. And then if we're feeling power or feeling disempowerment, it happens in our solar plexus in that nerve branch. So it affects the organs there, and the organs that the solar plexus innervates is the pancreas, and it also innervates some other ones like the liver and the stomach and so on. But power comes down the spine and through the solar plexus right into the pancreas.
Yeah.
It's why, for example, when people are scared, they can shit their pants. That's saying like scared the shit out of me. Because if you go into a strong episode of fear, it'll affect your colon. Like your colon will actually contract the musculature because it's connected to that part of the brain. So our whole body's connected as a reflection of different thoughts in our brain on an emotional level.
Yeah. Something, another type of cancer that you just mentioned, I'd be quite interested to get your view on this one is, what would you say is the kind of cause of skin cancer? Because obviously the skin covers all, well, certainly the first 6 chakras.
The skin cancer is always related to, I just try to figure out how to give like a valuable answer without the whole explanation, because it really takes like I have a whole course on it, right? But with skin cancer, the stress is related to multiple relationships. So it's not just like stress with one person or stress about like money, but it's stress about a multi-person dynamic. And it's interesting because the skin is it's an organ too. Like the pancreas is an organ, but the skin is an organ, but the skin covers many areas of the body. You know, it's covering the whole thing. So it's like, it's not localized stress. It's stress in a person's life that is involved in multiple relationships. So it's like covering a bigger part of the body.
And does it differ depending on where on the body, where the skin's affected? Does that make a difference as well?
Yes. Then there's sub-psycho-emotional themes that are still correlated with the chakras. So if you have skin cancer, you know, on your neck, then it's related to the 5th chakra, which is the brachial plexus. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Obviously, skin is something that's very prevalent in my own work as well, because, you know, I deal with people with lots of skin conditions, but I've never worked with anyone with skin cancer as such. So, yeah, it's just quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like what I'm kind of excited. The last class I just did for cancer prevention coach, someone asked me a specific question about, I think it was like uterine cancer. And that specific question, I said, I actually don't know the answer to that one. I can give a general answer though, but I don't know for sure the exact details. And then what I taught the class is that there's more to learn here. Like we all need to actually start investigating and researching and figuring out all the exact details of every part of the body. Because now that we know that the root cause of cancer is psycho-emotional stress, now when you start paying attention, you'll start realizing it's true and you'll start learning. So there's so much to discover about cancer now that real research is happening. Like for 100 years, the research has been locked in a laboratory in a beaker studying a cancer cell and putting poison on it to see what happens. Now the research is coming into the real world, so it's important, that's for sure, because cancer is one hell of a tragic phenomenon. But once we learn how it works, then we can actually be proactive, because many people, try to live a healthy life, then they still end up developing cancer because they don't understand that it's not even a physical thing. It's deeper.
Yeah.
You can be going to the gym but not be happy in your relationship. So you're doing a healthy physical thing, but emotionally you're not actually happy.
Yeah.
As an example.
Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier, cancer rates are rising massively. What are your views on cancer rates recently, since the beginning of, say, 2021, when a particular experimental gene therapy was rolled out? What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I've had this discussion with a lot of people because understandably the conclusion is, the rising incidence of cancer is because of being essentially poisoned by an experiment, because of the clear association with all sorts of other health challenges that have come with that. Poor immune system, like debilitated, sabotaged immune system, and so on. And because of the common theory about cancer that the reason you have cancer is because your immune system is weakened, and because 2020 was associated with damaged immune systems for most of humanity because of what was agreed to, for many people unknowingly, or knowingly, unfortunately, then the conclusion that many people draw is that because people's immune systems are so damaged and because they've been poisoned, now they're more susceptible to cancer. But what I would explain is that the reason cancer, and this is important too to really understand, is the reason cancer has risen so dramatically since 2020 is because of the amount of psycho-emotional stress that event triggered. And, lifelong friendships were broken. Family units were destroyed. And if you get into specifics in the psycho-emotional realm, guilt trips were laid on people. Ultimatums were made. You can never see your grandkids again unless you do what I say. Shaming, anger, resentment, regret, grief, hatred, control. This is the realm of stress. And that is actually what the pandemic created, but not, of course, on its own. We have to take the only way we can ever change this kind of stuff is if we take responsibility. So people were choosing to get into this, and that's when we get to the deeper stuff, what the real problem is. And that's that the average person today is not actually getting the quality time and the love and the connection and the guidance they need in childhood, because most parents didn't get that either, so they can't give it. The school system has taken over the family. The school system has taken over parenting. So it's almost like parenting doesn't exist anymore. Now, the only thing that exists is education. Just cramming children's minds full of information. That is, in a sense, useless, because really the only information you need to learn is the information you're passionate about, that you're going to apply immediately in your life. Like I spent probably, I don't know how, probably a year of my life, if I add it all up, learning French. I don't speak French today. I've never needed to use it. It's completely useless for me. But anyways, so what this ends up leading to is when we come into the world, into the responsibilities of life, and we hit the real challenges of life, which means we confront business challenges, career challenges, sexual experiences, and the challenges that can go with that. Being betrayed, not having a real sense of trust in a relationship, control, communication challenges, relationship challenges, parenting challenges, like the real challenges of the world, we're not prepared for. We're just not. And if anything, a lot of people are traumatized in their childhood. Like, according to Peter Levine, who has a lot of experience, like 30 years in psychology, especially working with sexual trauma, 1 in 3 people statistically have been sexually traumatized in their childhood. 1 in 3 people. The rate of cancer is 1 in 2. Sexual trauma is 1 in 3. Like this is what's really going on. So when a pandemic hits, people are not equipped actually with communication skills and with basically behavior skills to know how to navigate that challenge. So then relationships get destroyed and all kinds of psycho-emotional pain results. That ends up getting carried in the body, repressed, unresolved, and that is what causes cancer. So that's why the rate of cancer is through the roof. It might appear like it's because of a needle, but I'm not saying the needle isn't dangerous. I'm just saying the deeper stuff is what was correlated with that, and that's the real cause. And, we wouldn't even run into things like worldwide authoritarian control attempts and stuff like that if we were all kind of, if the world was different from what it is, where we actually had healthy family units in our childhood. Where parents actually have the time to spend time with their kids. That's why I'm excited about the other movement that's happening right now, which is growing like strong, is natural learning. Throw schooling right out the window. It's not even needed. This is just a belief system. Kids do not need to be educated from the day as soon as they can walk and talk.
Yeah. Indoctrinated rather than educated.
Indoctrinated, yeah. And natural learning is a new concept, and that's a book I highly recommend. The author is Jane Evans. Natural learning. It's not even homeschooling. You don't even homeschool your kids. You just actually start to understand human beings. And kids are essentially just like you and me. We're going to decide based on our soul, based on our inspirations and our desires, what we want to learn. We're always learning. Kids are learning from the day they're born. They're always learning constantly. We don't have to control them and say, you have to learn this. Now you have to learn that. Now you have to learn that. Because when you learn like that, you don't remember it, typically. You don't enjoy it, that's for sure. You sacrifice your emotions. You lose your freedom. You're controlled. So like one of our first relationships in the school system is a dysfunctional, unhealthy one, where we have to give our power over to an authority that decides how we're going to live our life every single day, almost for a whole year, for years and years and years in a row. This is the first relationship, the main one we have. Of course, teachers are just doing their job. They don't really understand the depth of what's actually going on. But that's where we lose our freedom. And yes, we actually are stepping into indoctrination because teachers are just teaching a curriculum. Many teachers I've talked to are frustrated with the shit they're teaching kids, but they have to do it because it's their job. So quit your job. Either change the system or get the hell out of it. And natural learning is something I'm really excited about, because it's healthy. It's actually normal. And some of the stories I'm collecting of kids that were never schooled, every single one so far, the kid has ended up being incredibly intelligent and successful. Incredibly intelligent and successful. So it's just a myth that your kid's going to be stupid or something if you don't cram information into their brain every day. It's just not how it works.
Yeah. So something that you might find interesting. So there's a guy called Angus Dalgleish here in London, and he's a professor of oncology at St George's Hospital. And I'm going to read a quote from him. So this was on his Twitter feed. And he said, as an oncologist, I'm seeing people with stable cancer rapidly relapse after a certain booster. So he actually got together with Dr. Asim Malhotra, who's a cardiologist over here, and they've formally requested that the government immediately stop those injections. So basically, Professor Dalgleish, what he's saying is, I think he's about 70 years old now, so he's probably been an oncologist for 45 years. And what he's seeing is, as soon as someone gets a booster, aggressive relapse, and a lot of them are dying within weeks of getting the injection.
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I read about way back in the beginning of this whole story unfolding since 2020, is that some of the I actually saw research on this and videos of someone doing a lecture on it in front of a bunch of scientists. And it was how injections can be used to affect the pineal gland and different parts of the brain. And I would not be surprised if they've actually succeeded with that, so that after you take that, you're more susceptible to stress. You're more susceptible to disconnecting from your emotions. The pineal gland's the home of consciousness. It's like where we become awake, like we are conscious of what's going on, whereas our subconscious just goes on autopilot. Like we can live life like a robot almost, where we're not even thinking for ourselves. Like whatever we were taught in childhood, that's what we now just teach our kids, but we don't actually question our childhood and what we were taught. So the pineal gland is like the place of consciousness. So the more disconnected you are from that, and if these injections can actually do that, disconnect people from that, then I could see that the chance of their cancer would actually be rising, because that's actually part of the process of cancer anyways. It's a disconnection of a part of ourself.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's another potential reason why that might be. You've already mentioned about, the damaging of the immune system and that kind of stuff. But I'm wondering if people that are taking these injections are subconsciously aware that they might be making a wrong decision for their own health. And that at a subconscious level is causing stress.
Yeah.
Right? Their ego is saying, this is the right thing, this is the right thing. And anyone that thinks otherwise is a conspiracy theorist. But their subconscious mind, which, as we know, is about 1 million times more powerful, is saying, well, hang on a minute. They weren't tested. The companies that are producing it have got no liability. The taxpayers paid for the development of these, not the companies that are profiting from it. So maybe the subconscious is saying, oh, hang on, have you made the right decision here? And maybe that is causing stress at a deep level.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, there's some other possibilities there too that come to mind. Exactly what you're saying. Some people go and get it. Afterwards, they just feel fine. Definitely. I've met lots of people. They're just like, yep, it's like nothing happened. But some people go and are massively sick afterwards and they're just debilitated in all sorts of, unique, surprising ways. And so that would be a percentage of people that would probably then encounter emotions and thoughts like regret or shame. Like, oh my God, I put so much pressure on my friend or my mother or whoever to get it, and I shamed them and I judged them, and now I got it, and I feel like something's terribly wrong inside me. And I regret this, and maybe I was actually wrong about my judgments, and my control and my shaming. And when you realize, like, as you're growing spiritually and you come to that awareness and you realize maybe you were actually wrong, it hurts. It's actually really difficult psycho-emotionally to take responsibility for that. And usually we don't know how to forgive ourselves. We don't know how to emotionally process. So there's one scenario with what you were saying. Another one is that many people I know went and did what they did, got it, because they were judged. So they're all, before they even want to actually take it, they already know their inner voice is saying no, but they're doing it because they're under pressure or guilting and shaming from parents or from their life partner or whatever. And it's one thing to carry that inner voice, like, this doesn't feel right for me, but I'm scared because if I don't do it, then the consequences in my love life will be destroyed. But when they actually do the act, when they receive it, that's when it's like they've crossed that line. And that's when the whole emotional complex can change. And what can typically happen is emotional suppression, psycho-emotional suppression. Just try not to feel what's actually real for me. And there you have an increase in cancer again. Yeah. So the whole pandemic is layered with all kinds of, I'm glad you brought that up, just layered with so many stress episodes for people that's the real cause, in my opinion. Yeah. Not to say there isn't physical damage being done by that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. This is such an amazing subject. I mean, I feel like we could do this episode over several weeks rather than an hour and a half or a couple of hours. Just to kind of wrap up, and I know this might be a very difficult question to answer, but what would be your 3 top tips for anyone wishing to prevent cancer from happening in the first place?
3 top tips to prevent it. 1 is practice having the courage your whole entire life, always, to be real. Be real. Don't ignore your emotions. Don't be like, oh, I shouldn't be angry right now. Or I shouldn't be jealous right now. Just be real. If you're afraid, be honest. Be honest with yourself. Be real. That would be number 1. It takes great courage to do that in many scenarios.
Yeah.
2 would be, one of the most healing things to do if you ever get into challenges is go be alone. Have the courage to go be alone and just be with yourself, and realize that if you spend enough time alone, you can gain clarity about what the next step you should take in your life. And 3, commit to learning throughout your whole entire life. Like learning about, the human journey. Learning about yourself. I don't mean education, like taking courses. I mean, through your own life experience, just keep learning everything you can. So if you make mistakes, if you go into darkness, if you make challenges, learn. What can you learn from it? And if you always extract things from your challenges, then you'll probably grow. So spiritually. So if you do those 3 things, then you'll probably grow through life. And that is the actual prevention of cancer, is to grow through challenges. Now, it's easier said than done. That's why 50% of the population is developing cancer. So I don't mean to talk, like if someone has cancer and you're hearing this, it's difficult because you have to go through like a real transformation. But those would be my 3 best tips in this moment.
Yeah, great answers. I love those. I love those. Paul, is there anything else in particular you'd like to add before we finish up?
No, I don't think so. I think I'd just like to invite anyone that's passionate about, contributing to the paradigm shift. And if you're already a health coach of some kind, or even if you're not, I've had natural learning parents take my course, stay-at-home moms. I've had personal trainers take my course, and now doctors, oncologists, and nurses, naturopaths. If you have a passion for learning more about the emotional and spiritual components of health and healing, then please follow your passion. Come take my cancer prevention course training. I want to keep bringing this knowledge to the world, and I can't do it alone. So that would be something I highly suggest to anyone if they want to learn about this, is take my training, Cancer Prevention Coach. I have my book, first and second book. The second book's not going to be ready for about 2 months. Of course, if someone has cancer, if you need help, I have a mentorship program. I do 4 sessions with people online. And I also have resource videos for people. And start looking for my coaches, because they're out there now. Cancer prevention coach, cancer reversal coach. All of my reversal coaches are still in training right now because there's a 1-year integration. So we have a monthly study group where we all come together to learn online, to keep practicing and deepening the knowledge. And I won't certify my reversal coaches until they actually have case history of someone reversing their cancer. So I'm holding a high standard to it, so it's the real deal, But yes, that's something I highly recommend.
Cool.
I guess that's about it.
Awesome. So where can people find you online, Paul?
You can look up Wheel of Life Academy, or look up The Root Cause of Cancer. My website is www.wheeloflifeacademy.com.
Cool. And I'll make sure that all the details are in the show notes as well.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for today. I feel like this has been a really powerful interview, and I think anybody listening to this is going to get a huge amount of benefit from listening to this. So, I would encourage people to share this with people, because whether someone has cancer or not, like any disease, it's always better to prevent it in the first place. So, please do share this episode as widely as possible. But yeah, Paul, thanks again so much for today. I think it's a really, really powerful interview.
Thanks a lot, Leigh. It was great. I'm glad to be on here again. Thanks for all your questions and everything that you shared.
Thanks again for coming on. So that's all from Paul and me for this week. But don't forget, you can join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.